He thought he owned New York. He thought he had buried his past under penthouse deals and political handshakes, a man who could buy silence and broker loyalty with a single phone call. But fate doesn't care how many judges you own or how deep your pockets run. Carlo Luciano was 30 minutes away from boarding a private jet that would crown him untouchable. A engagement gala in the Hamptons, a merger with old money, a woman who looked perfect on his arm and asked no questions about the blood on his hands. But at Gate 47 in JFK's International Terminal, his entire empire cracked. It wasn't a rival family or a federal raid that broke him. It was a woman in a faded jacket clutching boarding passes, shielding two little boys with his dark curls and his defiant eyes. The same woman he thought had vanished 3 years ago. The same woman he'd been told wanted nothing to do with him. This isn't just a story about love lost and found. It's a story about betrayal, orchestrated by the woman wearing his engagement ring, secret twins hidden in plain sight, and a choice that would force a king to trade his crown for something he never thought he'd fight for, his own blood. You think you know how this ends? You think a man like Carlo Luciano can have it all? Let's get into it.
Carlo Luciano didn't do coach. He didn't do security lines or baggage claims or any of the indignities that regular people endured. When Carlo flew, terminals cleared. When Carlo moved, the world adjusted. This morning, JFK's international wing had been sanitized for his arrival. His security team had swept the private lounge twice. Jennifer Sterling stood beside him, in Valentino and diamonds, her hand resting on his arm with the practiced ease of a woman who'd been groomed for this exact moment since birth. She smelled like French perfume and ambition, a combination that had served them both well over the past 18 months. "The Vanderbilts will be at the gala," Jennifer said, scrolling through her phone without looking up. "And the Astors. Daddy's finally convinced the governor to make an appearance." She glanced at him, her smile sharp and satisfied. "By Sunday night, you won't just own the docks and the unions, Carlo. You'll own legitimacy." That's what Jennifer brought to the table. Not love, not passion, but something far more valuable in his world. A last name that opened doors his money couldn't touch. The Vanderbilt family tree went back to the Mayflower. His went back to a fishing village in Sicily, and a grandfather who'd killed his first man at 14. But Jennifer didn't flinch at the tattoos crawling up his neck, or the rumors about what happened to people who crossed the Luciano family. She saw him as a project, a fixer-upper with excellent bone structure and a 9-figure net worth. He saw her as the final piece in a very lucrative puzzle. "Your tie," she said, reaching up to adjust the silk knot at his throat. Her touch was clinical, efficient. "Cameras will be everywhere this weekend. We need to look inevitable." Inevitable. That's exactly what they were. A merger disguised as a marriage, a political alliance wrapped in white lace and primetime coverage. His mother would have hated her. His father would have approved. Carlo checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars. Their jet was scheduled to depart in 40 minutes. By tonight, they'd be in the Hamptons, surrounded by old money and older secrets, playing the part of New York's most dangerous power couple. He'd already planned his speech for the gala, something about family and tradition and building a better future, the kind of meaningless poetry that made societals weep into their champagne. Jennifer's phone buzzed. She smiled at whatever she saw on the screen, then slipped her arm through his. "Come on, they're ready to board." That's when Carlo looked up toward the main terminal. Just a casual glance across the sea of travelers and flight announcements and ordinary people living ordinary lives. That's when he saw her. Catherine. And she wasn't alone.
Carlo's body moved before his brain caught up. 1 second he was standing beside Jennifer, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around his arm. The next, he was shoving through the crowd like a man possessed, his $2,000 shoes pounding against polished terminal floor. "Carlo!" Jennifer's voice cut through the airport noise, sharp with confusion and rising anger. "Carlo, what the hell?" He didn't turn back. Couldn't, because Catherine was there. 30 yards away and moving toward gate 23, and she had 2 small boys gripping each of her hands. Dark curls, olive skin. The way they walked, that slight swagger even at 3 years old. No, it wasn't possible. His security detail scrambled to keep up, confused by the sudden deviation from protocol. Travelers jumped out of his way, startled by the tattooed man in the bespoke suit, charging through JFK like the devil himself was chasing him. Or maybe he was the devil doing the chasing. Catherine's hair was longer now, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a worn jacket that had seen better days, nothing like the sundresses she used to wear when they'd meet at his apartment in Tribeca. When she'd laugh at his jokes and trace the ink on his skin and make him feel like something other than a monster. That was 4 years ago, before she'd disappeared without a word, without a trace, leaving only a note that said she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't be with a man whose hands were soaked in blood. He'd searched for her. For months he'd torn the city apart looking. Then Jennifer had appeared at a charity function with her political pedigree and her cold calculations, and he'd convinced himself that Catherine had been right to run, that men like him didn't get soft endings. But now she was here. And those boys. "Catherine!" His voice boomed across the terminal, causing heads to turn. She froze. He saw her shoulders tense, saw the way she instinctively pulled the children closer. Then she turned, and their eyes met across 20 yards of airport terminal. The color drained from her face. She grabbed both boys and started moving faster, practically dragging them toward the gate. One of them stumbled, and Carlo's heart lurched as she scooped him up without breaking stride. "Stop running!" Carlo growled, closing the distance. His security detail had caught up, forming a loose perimeter that was making other travelers nervous. "Catherine, stop!" She made it to the gate agent, fumbling with boarding passes and passports, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them twice. The boys stared up at their mother with wide eyes, confused by her panic. One of them, the one with the small scar above his eyebrow that looked exactly like Carlo's, turned to look back at him. Their eyes met. The boy didn't turn away. He just stared with an intensity that was far too familiar, a defiance that Carlo saw every time he looked in the mirror. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," the gate agent was saying, but Catherine wasn't listening. She was trying to explain something, words tumbling out too fast, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. Carlo reached the gate desk, his presence causing the agent to step back instinctively. Everyone in New York knew his face, even if they pretended not to. "Catherine." His voice was quieter now, deadly calm. "We need to talk." She finally turned to face him fully, positioning herself between him and the boys like a human shield. Her eyes were the same green he remembered, but now they were filled with something that hit him harder than any bullet ever had. Terror. She was terrified of him. "Please, just let us go." Behind him, he could hear Jennifer's heels clicking rapidly across the terminal floor, her voice rising in fury. But Carlo couldn't look away from the 2 little boys who had his face.
Carlo had made 3 calls from the back of his SUV. The first to his head of security, who tracked Catherine's rideshare to a modest apartment complex in Astoria. The second to his lawyer, who was already drafting paperwork Carlo didn't fully understand yet but knew he'd need. The third to Jennifer, who'd screamed at him for 7 minutes straight before he hung up and turned off his phone. None of it mattered. Not the gala, not the merger, not the carefully constructed future he'd been building brick by brick for the past 2 years. The only thing that mattered was the address his security chief had just sent him and the question burning through his skull like acid. Why didn't she tell him? The apartment building was nothing special. Peeling paint, rusted fire escapes, the kind of place where people minded their own business because they had to. Carlo's driver pulled up to the curb and his security detail started to exit the vehicle. "Stay here," Carlo said. "Boss, that's not—" "I said stay here." His voice left no room for argument. He took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the flickering hallway lights and the smell of someone's overcooked dinner. Apartment 3C. He could hear voices inside, Catherine's urgent whisper and the higher pitch of children asking questions. He knocked. Silence fell immediately. "Catherine, I know you're in there.
I'm not leaving until we talk." More silence. Then the shuffle of feet, the click of multiple locks being undone. The door opened a crack, the chain still attached. Catherine's face appeared in the gap, pale and exhausted. "How did you find us? How do you think?" Carlo kept his voice level, though everything inside him was screaming. "Let me in." "The boys are scared. You charging through the airport like that?" "Our boys, Catherine." The words came out sharper than he intended. "Because that's what they are, aren't they? Mine. Ours." Her jaw tightened. For a long moment she just stared at him, then slowly unhooked the chain and stepped back. The apartment was small but clean. Toys scattered across a worn rug, children's drawings taped to the walls, the smell of mac and cheese from the kitchen. The boys sat on the couch, identical pairs of dark eyes tracking his every move. They looked so much like him it physically hurt. "Peter, Paul," Catherine's voice was soft. "Go to your room, please." "But Mama." "Now." They obeyed, though the one with the scar, Peter apparently, gave Carlo one last challenging look before disappearing down the hallway. Catherine waited until she heard the door close, then turned on him. "You need to leave." "Like hell I do." Carlo stepped further into the apartment, trying to control the rage and confusion in his chest. 3 years, Catherine. 3 goddamn years you've been hiding my sons from me. Do you have any idea? "Hiding them?" She laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "I was protecting them." "From what?" "From you," the words exploded out of her. "From your world, your violence, your—" She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. When she looked up again, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I was 8 weeks pregnant when your people came to see me." Carlo went very still. "What people?" "2 men, very polite, very professional. They took me to a cafe in Brooklyn and explained that Carlo Luciano doesn't do weakness, that children make you vulnerable, and vulnerable men don't survive in your business." Her voice cracked. "They said you'd already given the order, that I could disappear quietly with money, or they could make me disappear permanently. My choice." The floor seemed to tilt under Carlo's feet. "I never—" "They knew things, Carlo. Things only someone close to you would know. The tattoo on your ribs, that scar on your shoulder from when you were 15. They said you'd decided that fatherhood wasn't compatible with running an empire." She wrapped her arms around herself. "They gave me 72 hours to leave New York, so I did." Carlo's mind was racing, cataloging every conversation, every person who'd been in his inner circle 4 years ago. Someone had done this. Someone had sent men to threaten the woman he— "I would never," he said, his voice rough. "Catherine, I searched for you for months. I thought you left because you couldn't handle what I was. I never knew about—" He gestured helplessly towards the hallway where his sons were hiding. "I never would have let you go if I'd known." She studied his face, searching for lies. "Then who did?" That's when his phone buzzed. He turned it back on in the car. One text message from Jennifer. "We need to talk. Now. Unless you want me to make this very ugly for everyone." Carlo stared at the message, and something cold and terrible clicked into place.
Carlo was still staring at his phone when he heard the footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. He knew the sound of expensive heels on cheap linoleum, knew the cadence of private security trying to look casual in a building where they stood out like diamonds in dirt. Catherine heard it too. Her eyes went wide. "Carlo, what did you—" "I didn't call her." He was already moving toward the door, but he wasn't fast enough. Jennifer didn't knock. The door swung open and she strode in like she owned the place, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who were definitely not airport security anymore. Her perfectly styled hair hadn't moved an inch since the terminal, but her expression had transformed from polished politician's daughter to something far more dangerous. "So this is where you ran off to." Her gaze swept the apartment with undisguised disdain. How quaint, very authentic, struggling single mother aesthetic. "Get out." Carlo's voice was granite. "Now." Jennifer ignored him entirely, her attention fixed on Catherine.
You have terrible timing, you know that? 4 years of staying hidden, and you just had to resurface the weekend of my engagement gala. She smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. Did you think you'd swoop in with your little props and reclaim your place? How romantic. Catherine took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the hallway where the boys were. I don't want anything from either of you. We were leaving. Oh, I know you were leaving. Jennifer pulled out her phone, scrolled through something. Flight 447 to Portland. 1 adult, 2 minors. You were going to disappear again, weren't you? Back to whatever mediocre life you've been living in whatever forgettable city. She looked up, her eyes sharp as knives. But Carlo here just had to play the hero, had to go chasing after his past like a lovesick teenager. Carlo moved between them. Whatever you think this is, what I think, she laughed, the sound cutting through the small apartment. I know exactly what this is, darling. This is a problem, a complication, the kind of mess that could derail everything we've built. We haven't built anything. This engagement is a business arrangement, and you know it. Exactly. A very expensive, very public business arrangement that I'm not about to let she gestured dismissively at Catherine, some random ex-girlfriend and her bastards destroy. The word hung in the air like poison. Carlo heard the bedroom door crack open. He turned to see both boys peeking out, Peter's small face scrunched in confusion at the sharp voices. Jennifer noticed too. Her expression shifted, something calculating sliding behind her eyes as she studied the twins. Oh, they really do look like you. How unfortunate. Those features might photograph well on you, but on children, they'll grow up looking like little thugs. She turned back to Catherine. Does the help know who their father is? Have you told them bedtime stories about Daddy's business, about all the people he's... That's enough. Carlo's voice dropped to a register that made even Jennifer's security detail tense. You need to leave, right now. I'm not going anywhere, Carlo. Do you have any idea what the tabloids would do with this story? Crime lords, secret love children, the Sterling family name attached to your illegitimate offspring? She shook her head slowly. No, this ends now, tonight, before it becomes a problem we can't contain. Catherine grabbed both boys, pulling them back into the bedroom. Peter struggled against her grip. Mama, who is that lady? Someone who's leaving, Catherine said firmly, trying to close the door. But Jennifer wasn't done. She stepped closer to Carlo, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. Do you remember those men who visited her 4 years ago? The ones who convinced her you wanted nothing to do with children? She smiled. Did you thank them? They were doing you a favor. I was doing you a favor. Everything inside Carlo went cold and sharp. It was you. Of course it was me, darling. Jennifer's smile widened. I've been planning our merger since the day we met. I wasn't about to let some knocked-up nobody ruin it.
Carlo sat in the back room of a restaurant in Little Italy at 2 a.m, the kind of place that didn't officially exist and where conversations were never overheard. His investigator, Marcus Chen, spread documents across the table like a coroner laying out evidence from a crime scene. You're not going to like this, boss. Marcus had worked for the Luciano family for 15 years, had uncovered bodies and bank accounts and betrayals that would make most people lose sleep for decades. But tonight, his hands shook slightly as he arranged the papers. Carlo had left Catherine's apartment 3 hours ago, after Jennifer had finally departed with her smug smile and her security detail and her threats. He'd stationed his own men outside Catherine's building, called in every favor he had to make sure she and the boys stayed safe, then made one phone call to Marcus. Find out everything. Just show me. Marcus slid the first document across the table. A bank transfer, 4 years old, from one of Carlo's subsidiary accounts. $50,000 to a shell company in Delaware. This company doesn't exist anymore. It was dissolved 6 months after this transfer, but I tracked the money. It went to pay 2 men, both former CIA, both now working private security for the Sterling family. Carlo's voice was flat. Her father's personal detail, actually. Marcus pulled up another sheet. These are the men who approached Catherine. I found one of them, got him talking for the right price. He confirmed they were hired to deliver a message, make it convincing, make sure she never came back.
Carlos studied the document, his mind working through the implications. She used my money? My accounts? With your father's access codes, Marcus hesitated. Jennifer didn't have those codes, boss. Someone gave them to her. The room felt like it was closing in. Carlos' father had died 2 years ago, a heart attack in his study, surrounded by ledgers and loyalty. The old man had never liked Jennifer, had told Carlos she was too cold, too calculating even by their standards. But he'd given her the codes? No, Carlos shook his head. My father wouldn't. Not your father. Marcus slid another document across the table. Your cousin, Dominic. The name hit like a physical blow. Dominic, who'd been Carlos' right hand, who'd helped him consolidate power after his father died, who'd stood beside him at the engagement announcement and toasted to family and future. Dominic's been working with the Sterlings for 3 years, started right around the time Jennifer entered the picture. Phone records, meeting locations, wire transfers, it's all here. He's the one who gave her access to your accounts, who helped us set up the threat against Catherine. Marcus's expression was grim. He's been positioning himself, boss. This merger with Jennifer, it was never about legitimizing your business. It was about putting you in a position where the Sterlings could absorb everything you've built, with Dominic ready to take over when you inevitably became a liability. Carlo felt a cold rage building in his chest, the kind that usually preceded violence. But underneath it was something worse, the realization that while he'd been playing king, Jennifer had been playing chess 3 moves ahead. There's more. Marcus pulled out a thin folder. 2 days ago, Jennifer filed paperwork with Child Protective Services, anonymous tip about a woman in Astoria harboring children in unsafe conditions, drug allegations, neglect, the whole package. It's all fabricated, but it's official now. There's going to be a welfare check. When? Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. Carlo checked his watch. 6 hours. He had 6 hours to figure out how to protect his sons from a system Jennifer had already weaponized against them. She's setting up to take them, Marcus's voice was quiet. Not to keep them, but to make them disappear into the system where you can't reach them. A judge in her pocket, a quick custody hearing, foster placement out of state. By the time you fight through the legal red tape, they'll be gone. Carlo stood, his mind already working through options. And she'll be exactly where I want her, desperate enough to agree to anything. What do you want me to do? Carlo looked at the documents spread across the table, evidence of a betrayal that went deeper than he'd imagined. Jennifer hadn't just lied to him. She'd systematically dismantled any chance he had of being a father, had used his own family against him, had turned his resources into weapons aimed at the only thing that mattered. Call everyone, Carlo said quietly. Every contact, every favor I'm owed. I need lawyers, judges, people who can move faster than the Sterlings. Then find Dominic, bring him to the warehouse on the docks. I'll deal with him personally. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. And Jennifer? Carlo thought about his son sleeping in that small apartment, about Catherine's terrified face when she'd opened the door, about 3 years of lies stacked on top of each other like corpses. Jennifer is about to learn that some kings don't need a crown to start a war.
Catherine's apartment door exploded inward at 6:47 a.m. She'd been awake for hours, couldn't sleep after everything that had happened yesterday. The boys were still in their pajamas, eating cereal at the small kitchen table when the battering ram hit. The sound was deafening, primal, the kind of noise that bypassed rational thought and went straight to survival instinct. NYPD, hands where we can see them. Men in tactical gear flooded the apartment, rifles raised, voices overlapping in a chaos of shouted commands. Catherine threw herself in front of the boys, her body becoming a shield even as her mind struggled to process what was happening. Down on the ground now. My children, she started, but rough hands grabbed her shoulders, forcing her face first onto the floor. She heard Peter screaming, heard Paul crying, and the sound tore something fundamental loose inside her chest. We have miners on site, someone barked into a radio, requesting CPS backup. Catherine tried to lift her head, tried to see her sons, but a knee pressed between her shoulder blades kept her pinned. Through the forest of boots and tactical gear, she caught glimpses of the boys huddled together on the couch, terrified and sobbing. Please, she gasped, please, they're just babies. They didn't do anything.
Ma'am, you need to stay down. We have a report of kidnapping, child endangerment, and possible narcotics on the premises. What? No, that's insane. Those are my sons. But they weren't listening. They were tearing through her apartment, overturning furniture, dumping out drawers, photographing everything. Someone was in the boys' bedroom, someone else in the bathroom. The efficiency was terrifying, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. A woman in a blazer stepped through the destroyed doorway, a CPS badge hanging from her neck. She surveyed the scene with clinical detachment, making notes on a tablet. Ma'am, I'm Sandra Novak with Child Protective Services. We've received a credible report that these children are being held against their will by their biological father, Carlo Luciano. Can you confirm your relationship to the minors? Catherine's mind was spinning. I'm their mother. This is my apartment. Carlo didn't... We were leaving yesterday. So you're admitting you were attempting to flee the state with Mr. Luciano's children without his knowledge or consent? No, that's not... He didn't know they existed until yesterday. I can explain. Novak's expression didn't change. We also have allegations of drug use in the home and unsafe living conditions. The officers are conducting a search now. There are no drugs. This is a setup. Someone is... Catherine tried to get up, but the officer holding her down increased the pressure. Please, you're scaring them. Just let me hold them. One of the tactical officers emerged from the bedroom holding a small plastic bag. Catherine's blood went cold. Found this in the closet, behind the shoebox. Novak took the bag, examined it professionally. This appears to be cocaine, approximately 2 ounces. She looked at Catherine with something that might have been pity. Ma'am, I'm going to have to take the children into protective custody while we sort this out. No! The word came out as a whisper, then louder. No, that's not mine. I've never touched drugs in my life. Someone planted that. That's what they all say. The officer above her sounded bored. Novak moved toward the boys, her voice shifting to something artificially gentle. Peter, Paul, my name is Sandra. I'm going to take you somewhere safe while we help your mommy, okay? No! Peter kicked at her, his face twisted with fury and fear. We want Mama. 2 more CPS workers appeared in the doorway, a man and woman with practiced smiles and outstretched hands. They moved in tandem, separating the boys despite their screams, despite Peter biting one of them hard enough to draw blood. Mama! Mama! Paul's voice cracked, reaching for her with desperate hands. Don't touch them! Those are my babies! Please, please don't take my babies! But they were already moving toward the door, the boys thrashing in the workers' arms, their cries echoing through the hallway. Other tenants had emerged, watching the spectacle with wide eyes and raised phones. The last thing Catherine saw before they disappeared was Peter's face over the worker's shoulder, his eyes, Carlo's eyes, filled with betrayal and terror. Then they were gone. The officer finally released her, and Catherine collapsed onto the floor amid the wreckage of her life, her screams filling the empty apartment where her sons had been eating cereal 18 minutes ago. Someone's phone was ringing. Hers. She crawled toward it with shaking hands, saw Carlo's name on the screen. They took them, she sobbed when she answered. Jennifer took our boys.
The warehouse smelled like diesel and decay, the kind of place where deals were made and bodies were disposed of with equal efficiency. Carlo stood in the center of the empty space, his breath visible in the frigid air, waiting for the man he'd sworn to destroy 3 years ago. Viktor Kozlov arrived exactly on time, flanked by 4 men who looked like they crushed skulls for cardio. The Russian's reputation preceded him, former Spetsnaz, current head of the Bratva's New York operations, and the one man who'd come closest to taking Carlo's empire apart piece by piece. They'd declared a truce after the territorial war nearly burned half the city, but trust wasn't part of the agreement. Luciano. Victor's accent was thick, his smile all teeth. When your man called, I thought maybe you finally ready to finish what we started, but no. You want to make deal. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating scars that told their own violent story. Must be desperate, yes? Carlo didn't waste time with pleasantries. The Sterling family. How much dirt do you have on them? Victor's eyebrows rose. The politicians? Your pretty fiancée's family? He laughed, smoke curling from his mouth.
You asking me to help you with woman problems? This is new low, even for you. She took my sons. The words came out raw. Used the system, planted evidence, had them ripped out of their mother's arms this morning. They're 3 years old, Victor. 3. The Russian's expression shifted, something almost human flickering behind the predator's eyes. Children. He spat on the concrete floor. This I do not tolerate. Women, business, territory, these things we fight over. But children? He shook his head. Your fiancée, she has no honor. Which is why I need what you have on her family. Records, witnesses, anything that can prove corruption. I know you've been watching the Sterlings, waiting for your chance to move into their political territory. Carlos stepped closer. I'm offering you that chance, but I need it now, today. Victor studied him carefully, taking a long drag from his cigarette. And what you give me in return? Your docks? Your unions? These things I could take anyway, eventually. The docks, Carlo confirmed. All of them. Full access to the shipping routes. No interference. Plus my contacts in the Port Authority, the customs agents I've spent 15 years cultivating. He paused. And I disappear. Once this is over, once my sons are safe, I'm out. You'll have free reign over everything I've built in the shipping district. You would give up empire for children you just met yesterday? Victor seemed genuinely curious. Most men in our business, they sacrifice children for empire. Then I'm not most men. Victor dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. He pulled out a phone, scrolled through something, then held it up. Security footage, bank statements, recorded conversations, years of carefully documented Sterling family corruption scrolling past. Senator Sterling, he has been very bad boy. Kickbacks from my competitors, money laundering through charities, evidence tampering in federal cases. His daughter, she learned from the best. Victor lowered the phone. I was saving this for when I needed political leverage. Cost me fortune and 2 good men to gather. Name your price. Already did. The docks, your contacts, your absence. He extended his hand. But I add one more thing. When you destroy the Sterlings, when you take everything from them the way they tried to take your sons, I want to watch. I want to see their faces when empire crumbles. Carlo took his hand, sealing a deal with the devil he knew to fight the devil he'd been sleeping next to. The engagement gala is tomorrow night, the Sterling compound in the Hamptons. Every major political figure on the East Coast will be there, plus media. Perfect audience. Victor's smile was vicious. I bring evidence, you bring the chaos. We make very beautiful disaster together. They stood there in the frozen warehouse, 2 men who'd tried to kill each other not long ago, now united by something that transcended territory and pride and power. One question, Victor said as he turned to leave. Why you not just kill her? Would be easier, cleaner. Carlo thought about Peter's defiant eyes, about Paul's terrified screams, about Catherine's sobbing on the phone while strangers stole their children. I want her to live with what she's done. I want the world to see exactly who she is. Death would be mercy. He met Victor's gaze, and I'm fresh out of mercy. Victor nodded slowly, respect flickering across his scarred face. Now you sound like Russian. Maybe we could have been friends, you and I, in a different life. In a different life, Carlo agreed. I wouldn't be a man who needs your help to save his own children. No, Victor said quietly. In different life, you would not be man who has to choose between crown and family. But here we are. He headed toward the exit, his men falling in behind him. Tomorrow night, Luciano, we burn it all down.
The Sterling estate looked like something out of fairy tale, all white columns and manicured lawns rolling down to the Atlantic. Television crews had set up along the circular drive, capturing the arrival of senators and socialites, old money and new power, all gathered to witness the merger of New York's most dangerous crime family with one of its oldest political dynasties. Carlo, arrived alone. Jennifer stood at the top of the marble steps in a white gown that probably cost more than Catherine's annual rent, her smile bright and practiced for the cameras. But when she saw Carlo stepping out of the car without his security detail, something flickered in her eyes. "You came." She descended the steps, her voice low enough that the microphones wouldn't catch it. "I wasn't sure you would." "Wouldn't miss it." Carlo offered his arm, playing the part one last time. "Where are my sons, Jennifer?" "Safe, in a lovely foster home upstate. The couple who runs it, they're very good at keeping children quiet." She squeezed his arm, her nails digging in slightly. "They'll stay there as long as you behave tonight. Smile for the cameras, say the right things, and maybe we can discuss visitation arrangements after the wedding." Carlo smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Of course." Inside, the ballroom was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, an orchestra playing something classical and forgettable. 300 guests mingled beneath projectors that displayed tasteful photos of Carlo and Jennifer, carefully curated images that told a love story that had never existed. Senator Sterling approached, his handshake firm and his smile sharper than his daughter's. "Carlo, glad you came to your senses. Jennifer told me about your little distraction yesterday. These things happen. Men have complicated pasts. But tonight we move forward, yes?" "Yes," Carlo agreed. "Tonight changes everything." The speeches began at 8. Governor Morrison talked about family and tradition. A Supreme Court justice made a joke about keeping Carlo out of his courtroom. Jennifer's mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than a car. Then it was Carlo's turn. He took the stage, microphone in hand, looking out at the sea of powerful faces. Every camera in the room was pointed at him. The live stream had over 2 million viewers. Perfect. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady. "Tonight is about truth, about showing the world who we really are." He turned to the technician at the control booth and nodded. The romantic slideshow cut to black. Jennifer's smile faltered. Then the first video began to play. Security footage from 4 years ago, showing 2 men entering a cafe in Brooklyn. The audio was crystal clear, their conversation with pregnant Catherine captured in devastating detail. "Mr. Luciano doesn't do weakness. You can disappear with money, or we can make you disappear permanently." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. "What is this?" Senator Sterling's voice boomed. "Cut the feed! Cut it now!" But the videos kept coming. Bank transfers from Carlo's accounts, authorized by Jennifer using codes she shouldn't have had. Phone records between Jennifer and Dominic planning Catherine's disappearance. The planted drugs, the fabricated CPS report, everything documented and time-stamped. Then came the Sterling family corruption, years of it presented in excruciating detail. Bribes, evidence tampering, money laundering through children's charities. Senator Sterling's voice on recorded calls, casual and confident, discussing which judges could be bought and which witnesses could be silenced. Jennifer lunged for the stage, but Carlo's security detail, the real one, not the men she'd thought she controlled, blocked her path. Viktor Kozlov emerged from the crowd, his smile predatory as he watched the chaos unfold. "You're finished at you," Jennifer hissed, her perfect composure cracking. "You'll never see those children again. I'll make sure of it. Actually, came a voice at the entrance, "that won't be possible." Catherine walked into the ballroom, flanked by 3 lawyers and a woman Carlo recognized as the family court judge who'd presided over Carlo's father's estate. Behind them, holding hands with a social worker, were Peter and Paul. "Emergency custody hearing," the judge announced to the room, "held 2 hours ago based on evidence of false reporting and witness testimony regarding planted evidence. The children have been returned to their mother, and Ms. Sterling is now facing multiple criminal charges." Carlo crossed the ballroom in seconds, dropping to his knees in front of his sons. Peter studied him warily, but Paul reached out a small hand, touching the tattoos on Carlo's neck with cautious curiosity. "Are you really our daddy?" Paul whispered. Carlo's throat tightened. "Yeah, buddy, I really am." Jennifer's scream cut through the moment. "This is a setup! This is—" But federal agents were already moving through the crowd, badges visible, handcuffs ready. The cameras caught everything.
The fall of the Sterling dynasty, broadcast live to millions. Carlo looked up at Catherine, saw the exhaustion and relief in her eyes, and understood that some victories came with a price that made them feel less like winning and more like surviving.
6 months later, Carlo stood in the backyard of a house in upstate New York, watching Peter chase Paul around a swing set while Catherine hung laundry on a line that swayed gently in the autumn breeze. The house wasn't much. 3 bedrooms, peeling paint on the shutters, a lawn that needed mowing. Nothing like the penthouse in Manhattan with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its view of the empire he'd built. But the boys had their own rooms, and there was a park down the street, and nobody knew his name at the local grocery store. That was worth more than any empire. "Daddy, watch!" Peter climbed to the top of the slide, his small face fierce with concentration. He still had Carlo's defiant streak, that refusal to back down even when he was clearly terrified. Paul waited at the bottom, gentler, ready to catch his brother if he fell. "I'm watching," Carlo called back, and he was, every moment now, making up for 3 years of missed birthdays and first words and scraped knees. Catherine appeared beside him, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She offered him one, and their fingers brushed in a way that still felt tentative, careful. They weren't what they used to be. Too much had happened, too many years lost, but they were building something new, something that looked more like partnership than passion. For now, that was enough. "Victor called this morning," she said quietly, watching the boys play. "Asks how you were adjusting to civilian life." Carlo sipped his coffee. The Russian had kept his word about the docks, had taken over Carlo's territory with ruthless efficiency. Dominic's body had been found in the Hudson 2 days after the gala, a message to anyone who thought about betraying the Bratva. Carlo had stopped asking questions about his old world. That life was done. "What did you tell him?" "That you're learning to make pancakes, and you only burn them half the time now." Catherine smiled slightly. He laughed for about 5 minutes. Jennifer was in federal prison awaiting trial on 17 counts, including conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment. Her father had resigned from the Senate before they could expel him, and the Sterling name was now synonymous with corruption. The media had dubbed it the engagement scandal, and true crime podcasts were still dissecting every detail. Carlo felt nothing when he thought about it. No satisfaction, no rage, just a distant awareness that somewhere in a cell, Jennifer was learning what it meant to lose everything. "Daddy, push us!" Paul called from the swings, his legs pumping but not quite reaching the height he wanted. Carlo set down his coffee and crossed the yard, feeling the boys' weight as he pushed them higher, their laughter mixing with the sound of wind in the trees. Peter demanded to go higher, always higher. Paul was content with gentle momentum, smiling at the sky. These were the small battles now. Bedtime negotiations, vegetables versus dessert, which cartoon to watch on Saturday mornings. Nothing like the wars he'd fought in boardrooms and warehouses, nothing that required violence or threats or carefully calculated moves. Harder in some ways, more important in every way that mattered. "I've been thinking," Catherine said when he returned to her side. "The boys are asking questions about your tattoos, about why we left New York, about why their last name is different from yours." Carlo had been dreading this conversation. "What do you want to tell them?" "The truth, eventually, when they're old enough to understand that people can change, that we're all more than the worst things we've done." She looked at him directly. "You're not that man anymore, Carlo. You haven't been since the moment you saw them at the airport." He wanted to believe that. Some days he did. Other days he woke up reaching for a phone that wasn't there anymore, instinctively planning moves in a game he'd walked away from. The violence in his blood didn't just disappear because he wanted it to. But then Peter would climb into his lap with a picture book, or Paul would reach for his hand crossing the street, and Carlo would remember that power wasn't about how many people feared you.
It was about two small boys who trusted you to keep them safe, who called you Daddy without knowing what that word had cost to claim. "I'm trying," Carlo said finally. "I know." Catherine's hand found his, their fingers intertwining like they used to years ago before everything broke. "We all are." The boys abandoned the swings and ran toward them, dirt on their knees and leaves in their hair, already arguing about something insignificant and vitally important in the way only children could. Carlo knelt down as they crashed into him, their small arms wrapping around his neck, and thought about crowns and kingdoms and all the things he used to believe made a man powerful. He'd traded an empire for this, for sticky hands and endless questions, and a life where his biggest challenge was teaching his sons to tie their shoes. It was the best deal he'd ever made.
Moral lessons from this story. 1. True power is about protection, not control. Carlo learned that real strength isn't measured by how many people fear you or how much territory you control. It's measured by who you're willing to sacrifice everything for. The man who owned New York became truly powerful only when he traded his crown to protect his children. 2. The past always catches up. You can't bury your mistakes under money, status, or careful planning. Jennifer thought she could erase Carlo's past with threats and manipulation, but the truth has a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment. What we do in the darkness eventually comes to light. 3. Love cannot be bought or brokered. Carlo's fatal flaw was believing everything, including love and family, could be treated as a business transaction. His engagement to Jennifer was a merger, not a marriage. But when faced with his sons, he discovered that the things that matter most can't be negotiated or controlled. 4. Redemption requires sacrifice. Carlo didn't just walk away from his empire. He actively destroyed everything he'd built to save his family. Real change demands a price. You can't keep one foot in your old life while reaching for a new one. 5. Some battles are worth losing everything for. Not all victories look like winning. Sometimes the greatest triumph is choosing the people you love over the power you've accumulated, even when it costs you everything you thought to find you. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or made you think differently about power, family, and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Drop a comment below and let me know, would you have made the same choice as Carlo? Could you walk away from everything for family? And please share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to choose what really matters. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you for being here.